Hello, I am Monica Sasso, and I am Red Hat's EMEA Financial Services Chief Technologist based in London. Before joining Red Hat, I spent most of my career in the big banks, delivering large regulatory and digital transformations on a global scale at firms like RBS, Barclays, and Coutts. I also helped build a new data center for a regional UK bank nationwide, acted as the head of change for smaller asset and investment management firms, and was a director at Deutsche Bank. At Deutsche, I delivered MiFID II globally for wealth management, as well as PSD2 and GDPR. So I'm au fait with the operational constraints you all face day in, day out. I made the move into tech from the banks in early 2020, 4 weeks before the pandemic sent me to my kitchen office. Because I felt like I could have more of an impact on changing the industry from the outside than I could from within. Not to sound cliched, I'm quite passionate about making sure the next generation has access to the best financial advice and products available, and that these products are accessible to all. So today we're talking about digital resiliency. Resiliency is a big topic at the minute, ranging from liquidity requirements following the 2008 credit crunch to business continuity post-pandemic. And coupled with advances in technology, these shifts are forcing a revolution in how we think about banking more broadly. I do believe, though, that banks have shown huge amounts of resilience just by still being here. When one hears the term digital resiliency, it's easy to immediately start thinking about resilience in terms of technology, and then IT estate's ability to recover from difficulties, spring back into shape, or to be elastic. But it's a lot harder to think about culture or an organization or an operation or even a strategy as resilient. The people, process, and strategy elements are hugely important, as Thomas has discussed. And before I expand a bit on that, I always like to start with a glance backwards to history. After all, banks and financial services institutions are some of the most resilient industries, rather industries that are tough because they have been around a long time. They have served us through wars, famine, economic booms and busts, incredible technological advancements, and even pandemics, more than just this one. So in researching the history of banking and economics in Portugal for this talk today, I learned that during the Renaissance period, Portugal was the world's economic power, introducing most of Africa and the East to Europe. In the same period, Portugal also established a multi-continental trading system extending from Japan to Brazil, or rather, the first real instance of globalization. It was around this time that banking had spread from northern Italy throughout the Holy Roman Empire, and bartering gave way to money. So the Banco de Portugal, or the Banco de Lisboa, I apologize for the poor pronunciation, was established in 1821 and is still one of the oldest banks in continuous operation in the world today, along with the likes of Banque de France, Citibank, and the Nederlandsche Bank, which is actually the precursor to the Dutch bank was the Amsterdam Wisselbank, which was the first central bank in the world. That's pretty good company to be in. I also spent some time on the Banco de Portugal Money Museum's website, which if you've never been to, you should definitely have a look at. And it posted something about what it believes its role in educating people is, that I think we in technology and firms and as wider consumers forget: the role of money in the life of citizens. So the image on the left was used for an advert for an event this summer called The History of Banking, showcasing the longevity of banking in Portugal. And you can get a feel for just how old this image depicting a banking transaction is. The second image is actually called The Money Changer and His Wife, and it lives at the Louvre in Paris. Given Princess Isabella of Portugal's role in developing prosperous trade and finance activities in the court of Flanders, which was the richest European court at the time, no doubt her legacy can be felt in this Renaissance oil painting from 1514 by the Flemish Renaissance artist Quentin Matisse. All of this makes me think that banking as an institution in Portugal is already quietly resilient, given the heritage and long traditions of commerce and its ethos that it plays a role in the lives of its citizens. But digital resiliency is also about people, culture, and technology being buoyant. I love the way that IDC stated in their Digital Resiliency Framework for the Future Enterprise paper that firms need to move from responding to adapting. Having spent most of my career at the banks delivering regulatory and digital change initiatives, I know how hard it is just to be able to even respond, much less adapt. The regulations, your consumers' expectations, the histories of mergers and acquisitions, including people in tech, and your shareholders' demands. So in thinking about how best to start talking about resiliency and adapting in the context of technology and ways of working, I went hunting for some images that would show what adaptability really means in the context of organizational change. And I was surprised how many of them have their roots in systems engineering, because for them, it's all about design for changeability. And that dovetails with the best definition of adaptability that I was able to find that resonates to me with most financial institutions. And that's the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions, the capacity to be modified for new use or purpose. So it got me thinking about how much, when I think about how much financial services have changed in the last 35 years, much less 200, I look back at my own life. I remember getting all dressed up and going into a branch with my parents to open a bank account as a little girl when I was 8. It was a privilege. Fast forward 32 years to 2018, and I opened a bank account in the UK on my phone from the back seat of a taxi in Austria. I mean, that illustrates that banks have shifted from being that trusted heritage brand to providing real-time engagement, convenient services, and are shifting to becoming platform economies in their own rights. Those that adapt to customer demands will continue to thrive. That service I consumed from the backseat of the taxi was an old service that was modified or had evolved because someone at a startup was empowered to think outside the box, to collaborate, as illustrated by the umbrella picture, to be innovative, and to fail in an environment that encouraged all of those things. The next generation of consumers are not as sticky. They are not as loyal, and there are rules that make it very easy to move accounts from bank to bank. They are truly digitally native. They spend their money based on their morals, and they do not think, like 8-year-old Monica did, that to have a bank account is an honor. They think it's a right and everyone should have one. They're okay with failing and starting again at speed, and they expect us to be the same, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel to some of us. The images with the bridges and the cars illustrate my experience at some of the banks that I've worked in, and that I see when I speak with customers across EMEA. Some cars are moving faster than others across the bridge, and some maybe haven't even packed up yet to start the journey, or maybe have started the journey and didn't pack up, or they didn't fill the fuel tank with fuel. So, i.e., maybe they didn't have a strategy to modernize or a strategy to evolve. Or, for example, they just started moving across the bridge without a digital transformation and cloud strategy. I know that when I was in the throes of delivering MiFID II at Deutsche Wealth, and my team was busy delivering PSD2 and GDPR at the same time for Deutsche Wealth, all I did was adapt. But I adapted so the bank could respond. And only my boss and the global head of legal risk and compliance clocked onto what was happening. I was trying to get the bank to adapt rather than just respond to the new rules in a very black and white way. I know so many people like me who really want to be at the center of this shift and are struggling with how to help, which is why when I came across this infographic, it made me think actually understanding how you operate in respond mode is also a good way to learn about how to operate in an adapt mode. I think this concept of adapting is so powerful and required for banks to continue to be the long-standing, trusted institutions that have protected our money and livelihoods for centuries. And it requires a different kind of consideration, a different kind of conversation than ever before. It requires a holistic view of resilience from within the bank, and equally a collaboration with regulators and shareholders to accept that things will change and maybe be more flexible. It sounds mad, me saying flexibility and regulators and shareholders in the same sentence. But I think we're at a turning point in the world where we could be more principles-led rather than black and white rules-led to enable this. If I talk to my 70-year-old father about experimenting and failing fast and not having a top-down rigid hierarchy, as a man who used to own and run a medium-sized construction company, he would laugh and say something like, "I see your master's degree was money well spent." I scoff. I make fun of my dad because it's easy. He knows that the business world has moved on since 1978, but those leaders that still cling to the enemies of adaptability will probably struggle to be resilient in their ways of working and operations, thus being unable to capitalize on their technology investments or showcase true digital resiliency. And going back to my boring old MiFID II stories, I remember when I was preparing briefings for the FCA in the UK and the BaFin in Germany, the differences in approaches was mind-boggling. It's the same across Europe. But I do wonder if a principle-led approach is something that will proliferate more when the EU regulation on digital operational resilience, or DORA, and the EBA rules on outsourcing enter into force. These are not nearly as prescriptive as GDPR or MiFID or mere transaction reporting, for example, but just as wide-reaching. So this means that to thrive and adapt to the regulations, firms need to adopt some sort of technology or resilient cloud-like infrastructure, organizational structure, and ways of working to deliver software to keep up with consumer demands. So how can you use your technology and systems to drive digital resilience in your firm and also be compliant with the operational resilience, business continuity, and exit elements of the upcoming law changes? And in the process, set your firms up to be truly agile so you can remain competitive and attract the next generation of technologists and consumers. Well, we think the first step is to design your technology for operational resilience, business continuity, and exit, so you can articulate your resilience to your regulators and your shareholders. So what does that mean, designing for operational resilience? If we look at a possible example way of how you can start to think about designing for operational resilience, the first thing is to identify the important business services processes, to address the vulnerabilities or risk, do a risk assessment essentially against those processes, and to assess the effectiveness of your controls, of your mitigations, to get a clear view of what your operation actually looks like. And then moving on to how can we start to think about designing for business continuity and exit. This is a difficult one because it's all about designing for options. The regulators have not been prescriptive on how to design an IT service to demonstrate compliance. Instead, they have given lots of different options or different possibilities that you can do. So therefore, we think a framework such as this could be a very useful way to think about all of the options that are available to your firms with a view of your firm's risk tolerance, your future in business, IT strategies, and things like that. But some of the options that the regulators have given us are a hybrid cloud, for example, retaining the ability to bring data or applications back on-prem to your own data center, having multiple data centers spread across multiple regions or in different availability zones, for example, or having multiple or backup vendors. These are some of the options that they have articulated. The challenge is that each option has pros and cons. And the following examples crystallize the need for a thorough analysis with a view of your firm's risk appetite and reality, frankly. The first one is data sovereignty. This has to be considered when you think about multi-region data portability of personal data. That could put data sovereignty at risk. Having the technical ability to migrate workloads quickly between clouds or true portability that doesn't require refactoring is another consideration. Another element that has to be considered is that firms have to model are plausible IT operational scenarios, such as a bug appearing in a common service that could make multiple availability zones a very risky proposition, could take down an entire data center. And the least fun one of all to consider is contracts and vendor lock-in, especially because stressed exits need to be modeled and catered for. And there is not a single regulator that really cares about a firm's commercial position with A, B, and C IT suppliers. So the more that we speak with our clients in EMEA, the more that we learn that their digital transformations and journey to being more resilient are more like evolutions rather than revolutions. And in order to be successful, they have to impact the organization at 360 degrees, meaning not only technology, but also processes, people, organizational structure, and culture. And they need to be adaptable and flexible, not only for the next generation of consumers, but also employees and technologists. So thank you for your time today, and I look forward to speaking with all of you in a bit.